I'm Alina Brooks, 30, and about to face my estranged family after 5 long years. Tonight, they're gathering at Maison, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, to celebrate my sister Heather's engagement. They've always judged my career choices, dismissed my culinary dreams as beneath our family name. Little do they know how much has changed since I walked away. My stomach knots as I straighten my simple black dress. Sometimes the hardest reservations to make are with your own past. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I stepped through the glass doors into the golden glow of Maison's dining hall, immediately swallowed by the soft hum of crystal, laughter, and ego. The air smelled of saffron, butter, and wine, flavors I once agonized over perfecting. Tonight, I wasn't here as the chef. I wasn't even here as someone who belonged. My mother spotted me first. "Alina," she said, her eyes doing that signature top-to-bottom scan. "You're here. We weren't sure you'd come." "I said I'd be here at 7:30, I replied, glancing at my watch, "and I am." She gave a tight smile and leaned in to kiss the air near my cheek. No warmth, just performance. The rest of the Mitchell family sat at the center table, exactly where I'd predicted they'd demand to be. My father, wine list in hand, already interrogating the sommelier. Heather, the perfect bride-to-be, draped in the latest from Gucci, flashing her new ring with just the right amount of restraint. Next to her, a man I'd never seen before. Bradley, I assumed. Then Ethan, my younger brother, and his wife Allison, both dressed in business chic as if they'd just walked off a boardroom floor. "Everyone's already ordered champagne," my mother informed me as I took the empty seat at the far end. "I hope that's all right?" I nodded. Of course. Heather offered me her cheek, barely turning. "This is Bradley," she said, as if unveiling an award. He stood and shook my hand, his grip unnecessarily firm. "Bradley Harrington, Goldman Sachs." "Nice to meet you." "No, I've heard so much about you. No, it's great you could come." Just a name and a resume. Classic Mitchell family style. "So," Bradley said as he reclaimed his seat, "what do you do these days?" The question landed like a polite slap. Everyone quieted. Not obviously, just enough for me to feel the pause. The moment. "I work in food," I said casually. "In food?" Heather echoed, arching an eyebrow. "So, like catering or waitressing?" I took a sip of water, keeping my smile in place. "Various roles. I've worn many hats." "I admire that," my mother said, in that tone she used when she absolutely didn't. "As long as you're supporting yourself, that's what matters." "You know," Heather added, "a lot of restaurants are laying people off right now. It must be tough, especially without a degree that leads to stability." The champagne arrived before I could respond, a vintage brut I'd personally selected for the Maison wine list. Jose, our sommelier, caught my eye. I gave him the smallest shake of my head. He nodded, no questions asked. I watched as each glass was poured with care, noting the temperature was exactly what I'd trained the staff to maintain. "We're celebrating an engagement," my father said, raising his glass, "to Heather and Bradley, a perfect match and a brilliant future." Glasses clinked. I took the smallest sip. Moments later, Jessica, one of Maison's most seasoned servers, approached with our amuse-bouche, a compressed watermelon sphere topped with fermented black garlic and delicate microgreens. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said, placing each plate with quiet elegance. Her eyes met mine for a brief second, a flicker of recognition and quiet respect. Then she disappeared. Heather leaned forward, staring at the single bite. "This is it? I'm starving." "It's an amuse-bouche," I explained, "a palate opener. The meal hasn't started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Alina," she snapped. "Just because I chose law over whatever this is doesn't make me uncultured." She didn't touch her food. Bradley rolled the bite around his mouth like he was analyzing wine, then used the word textural geometry, which meant absolutely nothing in this context. My mother took the tiniest possible bite, ever calorie conscious. My father swallowed his whole, barely pausing to taste it. Ethan and Allison at least seemed to enjoy it, or were polite enough to pretend. But only Heather left hers untouched. "I don't do raw garlic," she said flatly. It wasn't raw. It had been fermented for 60 days in a controlled environment, a process I had spent years perfecting. I didn't say a word. The staff moved in fluid choreography around us, clearing dishes, pouring water, adjusting cutlery. No one knew, not yet, but they would. I looked around at the table, the judging eyes, the half-hearted politeness, the assumptions that I was still the failure of the family, scraping by on tips and leftover ambition. And that raised the question I had been quietly waiting for all night. When they finally learned whose restaurant they were sitting in, would they still call me poor? By the time the first course arrived, a delicate arrangement of heirloom tomatoes, house-made ricotta, and basil oil, I had mentally cataloged at least 6 subtle digs directed at me, 3 backhanded compliments, and 2 outright insults. "This place is certainly ambitious," my father said, taking a single bite of the tomato and pushing the plate slightly forward. "I suppose that's the trend now. Over-decorated food on undersized plates." Heather didn't even pretend to try. She nudged her plate like it offended her. "The tomatoes are too acidic," she said with a slight pout, "and they taste underripe." I clenched my fork under the table. Those tomatoes had been hand-picked at 5 a.m. that morning from a farm upstate that grew exclusively for Maison. I had tasted them myself. They were perfect. "Is everything all right with your dish, miss?" Jessica asked, noting Heather's untouched plate. "Too acidic," Heather replied dismissively, not even looking up, "and the basil oil is too oily." Jessica met my eyes briefly as she cleared the dish. I saw it, that flicker of disappointment, not for me, but for the hours our kitchen team had spent prepping each element to perfection. My team, my people, and they were being judged by a woman who thought fine dining was Olive Garden in heels. Bradley leaned in. "So, Elina," he said, his tone sugary, "you still working at that cafe? The one with the mismatched chairs?" I blinked slowly. "That was years ago. I've moved on since." "Moved up, I hope," he smirked. "I'm doing all right. Because," he continued, swirling his wine, "this place, Maison, I've heard it's one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I mean, a tasting menu here costs more than most people's rent. Are you sure you can afford it?" Heather chimed in, lips twisted into a mock-concerned smile. "Yes, sis. We wouldn't want you to go broke just to keep up appearances." I put down my knife slowly. "I can cover my portion." "But really," Heather pushed, "what do? You said you work in food. Are you catering? Or is it more like meal prep for busy moms?" Before I could respond, the second course was placed in front of us. Perfectly seared scallops resting in a brown butter emulsion with pickled ramps. The aroma alone was enough to make several neighboring tables glance our way. "Now this looks promising," my father said, slicing into his scallop. Bradley sniffed his wine. "The pairing is passable. Not brilliant. You'd think a place this pricey would stock some serious vintages." Jose passed by nearby and overheard. He glanced at me subtly. The wine list was his creation, curated under my supervision. He had turned down a 3-star Michelin job in Paris to build Maison's cellar with me. I gave him a faint smile. Let them talk. Ethan's wife, Allison, tried to steer the conversation back to something less acidic than Heather. "So, Elina," she said kindly, "Ethan mentioned you're still working in food. Do you cook, or is it more on the business side?" Heather cut in before I could answer. "She probably hosts or seats people. Maybe she uses that business degree to hand out menus now," she said, laughing at her own joke. Even Ethan winced. "Actually," I began, but my father interrupted, raising his glass. "No shame in that," he said. "Everyone starts somewhere. Though after 5 years, one would hope for some advancement." I have advanced, I said, more firmly this time. Into what? Assistant manager at Applebee's? Heather sneered. The third course, hand-rolled tagliatelle with spring peas, pancetta, and mint, was served, but I barely registered the taste. My appetite had dissolved somewhere between Bradley's smug grin and Heather's mockery. I glanced at her untouched plate. "You're not eating?" I asked. "I don't eat carbs at night, especially not this much pasta. This is 3 ounces, measured exactly for balance. 3 ounces of starch. I'm not bulking for a powerlifting meet." The tension simmered like a forgotten sauce on low heat. Then she struck again. "So tell me, Elina, how are you really affording this dinner?" I looked up slowly. She leaned forward, arms folded on the table. "Be honest. Are you dating someone wealthy? Maxing out credit cards? Don't worry, we just want the truth." "You've been judging all night," I said calmly. My father cleared his throat. "No, Heather." "No," she said, seizing the moment to reestablish his alpha position. "We're all here, being real. If you need help covering your portion, just say so. We're family." That word landed like a slap. Family. The 4th course arrived. Duck breast, cooked to a perfect medium rare, served with cherry gustreak and farro. Bradley took 1 bite and grimaced. "This is undercooked." "It's medium rare," I said. "Duck should never be served well done." "I prefer my meat cooked through," he said, signaling for the server. Jessica returned with a polite nod, but I saw it, the tightness in her jaw, the insult stinging like a slap. My mother leaned toward me, lips pursed. "You still haven't answered, Elina. How are you affording a place like this? It's a simple question." No, it wasn't. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown. I could feel it building inside me, the fire, the pride, the truth. I had built Maison with my own hands, with calloused fingers and sleepless nights, with wounds no one here could imagine. I was about to speak. Then Bradley frowned, holding the black leather bill folder. "There's a mistake here," he announced. Everyone looked up. "They only charged us for the wine," he said. Jessica returned. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Yes, you've forgotten to charge us for the food." She glanced at me. I nodded once. She smiled. "There's no mistake," she said sweetly. "The dinner has been taken care of." "By whom?" my father asked. Jessica turned, met my eyes, and gave the faintest bow. "By Miss Elina, the owner." The silence that followed could have shattered crystal. 6 faces turned toward me, frozen mid-motion, forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses trembling slightly in lifted hands. I didn't move. I let the silence breathe, let it sting. Jessica placed the check back into the folder and handed it to Bradley with a polite, "Please let us know if there's anything else you need." Then she turned to me, and with the grace of someone who knew exactly what moment this was, added softly, "Chef Miranda asked if you'd like to see the new spring plating. Your usual table is ready whenever you're finished." I nodded. "Tell her I'll be there in 10. Bradley blinked. Once, twice. "Chef?" My mother's voice cracked. "Wait, Elina, what is this?" I took a breath, deep and steady, then folded my napkin and set it beside my untouched duck. "This," I said quietly, "is my restaurant." I let it hang, watched it settle. My mother's hand fluttered to her necklace. Heather went pale. Ethan looked, for once, intrigued. Allison's jaw had slackened slightly, her eyes darting around the room, perhaps noticing for the first time how many staff members had glanced my way with deference throughout the evening. "You work here?" my father asked carefully, his voice low. "No," I replied, lifting my gaze to meet his directly. "I own this place. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor of Maison." "That's," Heather began, but couldn't finish. "Impossible," I offered. "Unexpected? Embarrassing?" My father's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Maison has been in all the magazines, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, even the Times." Yes, I said. Food and Wine featured us last month. Bon Appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars last fall. Bradley stared at me as if I'd begun speaking an alien language. But you said you were just working in food. I wanted to see how you'd treat me, I said plainly, if you thought I was struggling. The realization flickered across Heather's face like a storm cloud. First confusion, then shame, then anger. So you set us up, she snapped. You let us sit here criticizing the food, the wine list, while you just sat there and let it happen? I didn't have to let anything happen, I said. You all made your opinions very clear. I didn't manipulate a thing. I just watched. The weight of 5 years suddenly pressed into the space between us. The distance, the silence, the assumptions, all of it. They hadn't called. They hadn't asked. They'd written me off and moved on without a second thought. And now that the narrative didn't fit, now that the black sheep had built the barn, they didn't know what to do. You should have told us, my mother said, her voice softening. This is an incredible achievement. Is it only an achievement now that you approve of it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Wasn't it just servant's work before? We were worried about your future, my father added, about your stability. No, I said sharply. You were worried I wouldn't fit the image, that I'd embarrass you, that I'd become the one Mitchell child who didn't carry the brand. I stood up, adjusting my dress. For what it's worth, Ethan said quietly, this is impressive, really. I didn't know. You didn't ask. I should have, he admitted. Heather had gone strangely quiet. Her fork lay untouched. Her fiancé, for once, looked completely out of his depth. My mother leaned in, her tone switching to damage control. We should talk more. We should catch up properly. Maybe have brunch this weekend. There's that club near the park. I'm busy this weekend, I said, not unkindly, but thank you. She reached for my arm. Elena, please, don't walk away like this. I looked down at her hand on my wrist. It trembled slightly. The same woman who once said, we don't do chefs in this family, now sat in my restaurant, unsure of her place. I'm not walking away, I said calmly. I'm walking forward. There's a difference. I turned to leave. From behind, I heard Bradley ask under his breath, so, does this place make money? Typical. I paused at the edge of the dining room, then turned back, just long enough to deliver one last truth. This place turns a monthly profit that eclipses your annual bonus, Bradley. And no, I didn't get here by sleeping with someone richer than me. I got here by waking up earlier, staying later, bleeding into prep tables, and building something real. He shut up after that. As I passed the maitre d', Marcus greeted me with a proud smile. Private dining room's ready, chef. The investors are waiting. Thanks, Marcus. Let them know I'm on my way. Behind me, my family sat in stunned silence, still processing the reversal of everything they thought they knew. I didn't hate them, but I also didn't owe them an apology for succeeding without their approval. And somewhere, deep inside, beneath the layers of pain and pride and poise, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but in me. They finally saw me. Not the failure, not the rebel, but the woman who had built her own table and served them at it. I stepped into the private dining room, closing the door behind me with a quiet click. The sound felt final, like a book shutting on a chapter I no longer needed to reread. Inside, the lighting was soft, the air charged with anticipation. 3 investors were already seated, polished, tailored, and smiling. These were people who respected me not for my name, not for my pedigree, but for my numbers, my vision, and the food that had earned their trust. Chef Brooks, one of them said, rising, we were just saying how remarkable the press has been lately. Food and Wine, the Times, and now a cookbook in the works. I smiled, letting my breath settle. It's been a busy season. We dove into discussions, expansion, the second location, distribution for the spice line. For the first time all evening, I felt like myself again. Not the daughter under scrutiny, not the sister who didn't measure up, just Elena, chef, founder, CEO. Still, pieces of the earlier dinner drifted in and out of my mind like stubborn steam that wouldn't dissipate. My mother's trembling voice, Heather's indignation turning to something that looked suspiciously like regret, Ethan's half-apology. They weren't ready for the truth, I thought, but they got it anyway. After an hour of talking growth and capital, I walked the investors out through the kitchen. Miranda caught my eye as I passed. "How'd it go?" she asked, still in her chef whites, clipboard in hand, sleeves pushed up to reveal a fresh burn she hadn't even noticed yet. "Strong," I said. "They're ready for the next phase." "Good, we are too." I nodded toward the dining room. "And the storm?" She smirked. "Cleared out 10 minutes ago. Heather looked like someone had slapped her with a truffle. Your mom asked for a business card. I gave her the fake one we use on telemarketers." I laughed, genuinely. The tension in my shoulders began to unwind. But the peace didn't last. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cool air kissed my face, and I heard the rapid click of heels behind me. "Elena!" I turned. It was my mother, breathless, pearls askew, jacket flung haphazardly over her arm. The polished image she curated so carefully now cracked and vulnerable. "We need to talk," she said. I crossed my arms. "About what?" She hesitated. "Everything." Behind her, the rest of the family trickled out, like a scene from a play. My father, buttoning his coat and not meeting my eyes. Heather, arms crossed, her posture defiant, but her expression shaken. Ethan and Allison standing off to the side, saying nothing. "I have a meeting to prepare for," I said. "Tomorrow's tight." My mother stepped closer. "This is important." "So was the last 5 years," I said softly. "We thought you were lost." "No," I corrected. "You thought I was wrong, and you made sure I knew it." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father stepped forward, his tone managerial. "Perhaps we could schedule dinner, just us, talk about how we can support you moving forward, maybe even help with expansion." "I don't need help," I said flatly. Heather finally spoke, voice sharp. "You're being dramatic. No one's trying to take credit for your success." "Really?" I turned to her. "Because you've spent the last hour mocking what I built, questioning how I paid for things, laughing when you thought I was struggling." "That's not fair," she shot back. "We were working with the information we had." "You had access to me," I said. "You just didn't care enough to ask." The silence that followed was heavy and real. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Where do we go from here?" I looked at each of them, not with anger, but with the kind of calm that comes from survival. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but if there's going to be any relationship between us, it needs to be on new terms." "Such as?" he asked. "Such as no more unsolicited advice, no more subtle digs about my choices, and absolutely no attempts to network through Maison." I locked eyes with Bradley. He looked away. "About the wedding," my mother said, clearing her throat. I turned to Heather. "What about it?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "We'd still like you to come. Just as your sister, not whatever version of you we invented before tonight." I studied her for a long moment. Despite everything, the years of coldness, the rivalry, the condescension, there had been good memories too. Shared secrets, inside jokes, late-night tears over boys and heartbreaks, a time before everything became a competition. "I'll come," I said. She blanked. "Really?" I nodded. "And, if you'd like, I can host a dinner here, for the wedding party, as a gift." Her eyes widened, and for the first time that night, she smiled, genuinely. "You would do that?" "You're still my sister," I said. "And this place, it's my way of sharing something that's mine, on my terms." "I'd be honored," she whispered. We stood there for a moment, not as perfect daughters in our parents' eyes, but as women trying, maybe for the first time, to see each other. Then I glanced at my watch. "I really do have to go," I said. "Of course," my father replied quickly. Your business comes first." "Not always," I said, giving a small smile. "But tonight, yes." As they turned to leave, my mother paused. "Brunch, this Sunday?" I nodded. "Not at your club, though. There's a little hole in the wall in the East Village I think you should try." "We'll be there," she promised. I watched them disappear into the city lights, their silhouettes slowly swallowed by passing traffic. Then I exhaled, not just from my lungs, but from years of holding it all in. I had fed them truth tonight, raw, plated, and perfectly timed. And for once, they swallowed it. 2 weeks passed in a blur. Spring menu revisions, meetings with my publisher, cookbook layout deadlines, and preliminary discussions for a second Maison location kept my days packed from morning prep to midnight notes. But even in the busiest hours, that dinner, that moment, kept echoing inside me like a quiet drumbeat. Surprisingly, brunch with my family had gone well. I took them to Alma's, a tiny, graffiti-decorated cafe in the East Village owned by a former colleague from my line cook days. The chairs didn't match, the menus were handwritten, the coffee was poured from scratched-up metal kettles. And yet, when my father bit into his shakshuka and paused mid-chew, I could almost see the old version of him crack. "I never knew eggs could taste like this," he said, swiping the last of the sauce with a hunk of sourdough. Small steps. Not absolution, but movement. And that was enough, for now. Back at Maison, I sat at my usual table after closing, nursing a cup of strong black tea while the staff wrapped up their final duties. Jessica counted the register, humming softly. Marcus and Jose stood near the wine racks, reviewing pairings for an upcoming private dinner. Miranda had just left after we finalized the spring menu's 5th draft. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed. "Heather." Florist just doubled their quote. "I'm one bridesmaid meltdown away from losing it. Free for coffee tomorrow? I could use someone who won't sugarcoat things." I stared at the screen for a moment, a little surprised, not just by the invitation, but by the tone. No smugness, no passive aggression, just her. I typed back. "Alina, 3:30, Cafe Kinfolk. They have strong opinions and stronger coffee." I hit send. Another small step. This wasn't a perfect reconciliation. No dramatic hugs, no grand apologies, just a slow unwinding of damage, like a tight knot finally starting to loosen. And perhaps that was more real than anything else. Earlier that week, Ethan had texted too. "Ethan, any chance I can bring the kids by the kitchen sometime? I want them to see what other paths look like, ones that don't come with a suit and tie." That message hit me harder than I expected. It was simple, but sincere, and it made me think about how much I had wanted someone, anyone, to believe in my dream when I first started. Just one person who would say, "You're not crazy for wanting this." I didn't get that, so now I was giving it to others. Every Saturday morning, before the brunch rush, Maison's kitchen turned into a classroom. 8 young chefs from underserved neighborhoods, handpicked through a local mentorship program I had quietly funded, would arrive at 7 a.m. sharp, aprons on, eyes shining. One of them, a 19-year-old named Zoe, reminded me so much of myself at that age it scared me. Scrappy, fierce, always trying to be invisible and indispensable at the same time. She had started with barely any knife skills, but last week she plated a dish that made Miranda and me look at each other in genuine silence. After service that night, I offered her a paid apprenticeship. The way her hands trembled when she accepted reminded me exactly why I built all this in the first place. It was never just about proving myself to my family, though I won't lie, that victory still tasted sweet. It was about giving someone else what I never had: a door, a seat at the table, a place to stand and say, "I belong here." Jessica's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "All set for closing, chef. Anything else you need?" I smiled. "Nope, you all crushed it tonight." She gave a playful salute, then disappeared through the back with the others, leaving me alone with my tea and my notebook, pages blank, waiting for the cookbook's opening chapter. I stared at the paper, my pen hovered for a second, then, finally, I began to write. Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavor. When paths felt unclear, I followed my palate. The words came easily now. These recipes are more than dishes. They're chapters of a life lived in pursuit of authenticity. 5 years ago, I stood at a crossroads between expectation and passion. I chose passion. It cost me everything and gave me more than I could have imagined. I set the pen down, breathing deep. Tomorrow would bring more chaos, a stubborn vendor, a rescheduled tasting, Heather's wedding drama, finalizing the last cookbook edit. But tonight, in this empty room that once held only my doubt and ambition, I felt whole. The cafe was already half full when I arrived the next afternoon. Cafe Kinfolk was a small, plant-filled space tucked between a used bookstore and an art supply shop, the kind of place that served pour-over coffee with exact temperatures and menus scrawled on chalkboards, a place that didn't care about last names. Heather was sitting by the window, wearing a beige blazer over a matching jumpsuit, minimal makeup, dark circles peeking through. She stood when she saw me. Hey, I said back, sliding into the seat across from her. You look alive. She let out a snort laugh and dropped into her chair. Barely. Wedding planning is a full-time mental breakdown with a floral budget. We ordered. I went with black coffee. She got something with oat milk and lavender that I would never have expected her to tolerate 5 years ago. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I didn't sleep after that dinner, she admitted. I tilted my head. You don't usually let things bother you. I don't usually find out my sister owns a restaurant I just insulted on 5 different levels. I smiled faintly. 6, actually. You said the duck was undercooked. She rolled her eyes, but the tension between us softened. I was a brat. You were worse than a brat, I said. You were cruel. She nodded slowly. I know. Another pause. I think I was jealous, she admitted. I used to think I was winning. The degrees, the job, the fiancé. But you, her voice caught, you built something real, and you didn't need anyone's permission to do it. That landed heavier than she expected, than I expected. I took a slow sip of coffee. That night, I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I know, she said quickly. I would have deserved it, but you didn't. You just let the truth speak for itself. Sometimes the truth's the most powerful thing in the room, I said. She nodded. It was. We talked for an hour about florists, table runners, and how their venue canceled last minute due to a burst pipe, about her doubts regarding Bradley's controlling tendencies, about how she was starting to realize maybe she didn't even want the plaza wedding. Maybe she wanted something simpler, more real. I didn't say I told you so. I just listened. That evening, after we hugged goodbye, genuinely this time, I returned to Maison and found Zoe standing by the pass line, holding a notebook with a dozen handwritten sauce formulas. Chef, she asked, nervous. Yeah? I was wondering, how do you know if a sauce is done? Like done, not by the timer, but by instinct? I smiled. You taste it, and you trust that the person you've become knows the answer. She blinked. I tapped her shoulder. Come with me. You're going to run the sauce station tonight. Her eyes widened. For real? For real. She nearly dropped the notebook. That night, Maison was full, reservations packed, the kitchen humming like a jazz rhythm. The staff moved like one body. Every plate that went out carried months of training, years of pain, and a piece of me. Toward the end of service, Miranda caught me near the walk-in. Reminder, she said, we've got that tasting event tomorrow, plus your cookbook shoot on Thursday and the meeting with the architect for the second location. I grinned. Busy week. And, she added, tossing me a folded note, someone dropped this off for you, handwritten, no name. I opened it. I underestimated you, but I'm glad I finally saw the real you. Dinner that night changed everything. I'm trying, for what it's worth. Dad. I stared at the paper. No apology, no big speech. Just an effort. For the Mitchell family, that was monumental. As I walked back through the kitchen, I passed the dry erase board where we usually wrote reminders. Someone, probably Marcus, had erased the inventory notes and scribbled in black marker. A table is just a table until you build it yourself. I stood there for a second, heart tight in my chest. He was right. This restaurant, this life, I built it, not out of spite, but out of passion. And now, I got to fill that table with whoever the hell I wanted. The night of Heather's rehearsal dinner, Maison was glowing. Candles lined the private room, flickering against glass vases of pale pink roses and wild greenery. The long oak table gleamed under soft lighting, menus printed in gold foil beside hand-tied napkins. Everything was intentional, curated, not for show, but for warmth. Heather walked in first, a quiet intake of breath escaping her lips. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It doesn't feel staged. It feels like us, or at least the version of us I want to believe in." I smiled from across the room. That's the point. Guests began filtering in. Bridal party, close friends, a few extended family members. My parents arrived last. My father looked around the room carefully, taking in every detail as if trying to understand a language he'd never bothered to learn before. My mother approached me with a box in her hand. "This is for you," she said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "It was your grandmother's. She wanted you to have it when you opened your first business. I didn't think it would be this." I opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with tiny ivy leaves, worn soft with time. "She would have been proud," my mother said. "Even if we didn't understand your choices, she would have." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. The dinner moved smoothly. Bradley, to his credit, stayed respectfully reserved. Heather clinked her glass and stood to give a short toast, surprisingly heartfelt. "I used to think I had to be the perfect one in this family," she said, glancing at me. "But turns out perfection is boring. I'm learning that strength looks a lot like standing back up when no one offers you a hand. Alina, thank you for this, and for everything you taught me, even when I didn't know I was learning." I raised my glass to her, feeling a genuine swell of affection. Later that evening, while clearing the last of the dishes, Zoe approached me nervously. "You said I could ask you anything," she started, fiddling with her apron strap. "Yeah? What happens when you succeed and your family still doesn't get it?" I thought for a moment. "Then you let your success speak louder than your explanations," I said, "and you stop asking for permission to be proud of yourself." She nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. As the guests left, my father hung back, looking at the dining room with the same quiet contemplation he'd worn since that dinner weeks ago. "You've built something remarkable here," he said, "something lasting." "I know," I replied, my tone not defensive, just certain. "I wish we had seen it sooner." "I don't," I said. "If you had, I might have spent too long trying to make you proud instead of becoming proud of myself." He looked at me then, really looked, and nodded. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need an apology anymore. I had passed the point of wanting to be understood. Now, I just wanted peace, space to continue building. A few days later, I sat with my editor, finalizing the cookbook introduction. She read the first paragraph aloud. "Food has always been my truest language. When words failed, I spoke through flavor. When paths felt unclear, I followed my palate." She looked up at me. "It's not just a cookbook, Alina. It's a memoir." I smiled. That's the idea. Later that night, I stayed behind after close. The kitchen was clean, the dining room quiet, the windows glowing softly against the dark city outside. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Zoe. "Alina, you're on Sauce next weekend again. Bring the heat, bring the finesse, and don't forget, you earned that station." I hit send. Then I turned off the lights and walked out the door, locking up behind me. Maison stood quiet, still, solid. But inside, it pulsed with everything I'd built: pain, persistence, and a fire no one else could dim. I didn't just survive their doubt, I transformed it into salt, into sauce, into something unforgettable.